There's a version of you that shows up without warning. Your partner says something small, cancels plans, takes too long to reply, uses a tone you didn't expect, and something shifts. Not gradually, instantly. The calm, functional adult you've been all day disappears, and in its place is something rawer, louder, more desperate than the situation could possibly justify. And then, an hour later, you're back, looking at what just happened, wondering who that was. You know the feeling, the reaction that was 10 times bigger than the moment deserved, the tears that came out of nowhere over a comment that shouldn't have landed that hard, the rage that surprised even you, the shutdown so complete it scared the person watching it. And then the question that follows every single time: why do I keep doing this? Here's what you've probably told yourself: that you're too sensitive, that you lack discipline, that you need to grow up, get a grip, learn to regulate. You've treated these reactions as evidence of a flaw, something broken in your character that better self-control would eventually fix. That story is wrong, and it's costing you. John Bradshaw spent decades working with adults who couldn't understand their own emotional lives. Therapist, lecturer, author. He is best known for his work on what he called the wounded inner child. The idea that inside every adult who reacts disproportionately, who collapses under criticism, who panics at the first sign of distance, there is not a flawed grown-up, but a child. A real psychological child, frozen at a specific age, carrying a specific unmet need, and still waiting, after all these years, for someone to finally answer it. What Bradshaw discovered wasn't a metaphor, it was a mechanism, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The reactions you've been ashamed of aren't coming from the adult you've worked so hard to become. They're coming from someone much younger, someone still inside you, still stuck in the moment the wound was made. And until you understand who that child is, where they came from, and what they've been trying to tell you all along, they will keep running your life from the inside. Most people assume that growing up means leaving childhood behind. That time, by its own logic, moves you forward. That what happened at 7 or 9 or 12 gets smaller in the rearview mirror until it disappears. This is one of the most dangerous assumptions you can carry into adult life. Bradshaw's central discovery was this: when a critical emotional need goes unmet in childhood, the child doesn't move on. She freezes. Psychologically, developmentally, she stops at the age the wound was made, and waits, not consciously, not by choice, but with the relentless, wordless persistence of something that was never resolved. The need doesn't have to come from dramatic abuse. It rarely does. It comes from the father who was physically present but emotionally elsewhere. The mother whose love was real but conditional, available when you performed, withdrawn when you didn't. The household where anger wasn't allowed, where sadness made adults uncomfortable, where you learned early that certain parts of you needed to stay hidden to keep the peace. These are not dramatic stories. They are ordinary ones, and they leave the same mark. What gets frozen isn't just a memory, it's a version of you. A child at a specific age, carrying a specific emotional reality that was never validated, never resolved, never completed. Bradshaw observed that most adults don't carry one wounded inner child. They carry several. A 4-year-old terrified of abandonment, an 8-year-old paralyzed by shame, a 12-year-old burning with anger she was never allowed to express. Each one frozen at the moment the need was denied. Each one still inside you, still at that age, still waiting. And here is what makes this so difficult to see. On the outside, you grew, you learned, you achieved, you built a life that looks, by most measures, like adulthood. But inside, those children didn't age with you. They stayed exactly where they were. And they are extraordinarily patient. They don't announce themselves. They wait for a trigger, a specific situation in the present that resonates with the original wound. not logically, not literally, but emotionally, in the body, in that part of you that doesn't distinguish between then and now. And when that trigger arrives, the frozen child doesn't politely raise her hand. She takes over. The adult you've spent years becoming doesn't disappear permanently. But in that moment, she steps aside. And what speaks, what reacts, what floods the room, is someone who has been waiting a very long time to finally be heard. What that looks like from the outside and what it feels like from the inside is what we need to look at next. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. You've probably blamed yourself for the reactions, told yourself they're proof of weakness, immaturity, poor emotional control, that a more disciplined person wouldn't fall apart over something so small. But that framing misses what's actually happening. And as long as you keep using it, you'll keep being blindsided. What Bradshaw identified isn't a failure of willpower, it's a takeover. When a present situation triggers an old wound, not intellectually, but somatically, in the nervous system, the frozen child activates. And in that moment, you lose access to the resources you've spent your adult life building. Reason, perspective, the ability to pause before responding. They don't disappear permanently, but they become temporarily unreachable. What runs the show instead is the emotional reality of a child, the terror, the desperation, the rage of someone who never got what she needed and is convinced, in this moment, that she never will. Your partner cancels plans. Objectively, it's minor. But the 4-year-old inside you, the one whose parent disappeared without warning, without explanation, without ever coming back the way she needed, that child doesn't experience a cancelled plan. She experiences abandonment. The original abandonment, in full, in the body, right now. And she responds accordingly. Panic, clinging, shutdown, or rage. Not because you're irrational, because she is 4. Your boss delivers feedback on your work. It's constructive, you know that. The adult in you knows that. But the 8-year-old who was mocked in front of others, whose efforts were dismissed, who learned that being seen meant being humiliated, she doesn't hear feedback. She hears the original verdict, you are not enough. And she responds the way she did then, collapsing, going silent, or fighting back with a ferocity that confuses everyone in the room, including you. This is the mechanism Bradshaw documented across decades of clinical work. The trigger doesn't have to be a perfect replica of the original wound. It only has to rhyme with it. A tone of voice, a pause before a response, a door closing. Something in the present that carries the emotional frequency of something from the past. And suddenly the child is driving, and the adult is in the back seat, watching, unable to intervene. The hijacking ends. It always does. The child retreats, the adult returns, and you're left standing in the aftermath of something you didn't fully choose. And what comes next? The thing that lands after every single one of these episodes is the part that does the most damage of all. After the hijacking ends, there's a second event, quieter than the first, more private, and in many ways, more destructive. You look at what just happened, the outburst, the collapse, the desperation, and you turn on yourself. Why do I keep doing this? What is wrong with me? I'm an adult. I should have more control than this. The shame arrives fast, and it arrives hard, and it feels, in the moment, like accountability, like the responsible response to having behaved badly. It isn't. It's the second wound. Bradshaw observed something in his clinical work that reframes this entirely. The way most adults respond to their own emotional reactions is a precise repetition of what was done to them in childhood. The child who was told her tears were manipulation learns to tell herself the same thing. The child who was mocked for his fear grows into the adult who mocks himself for being afraid. The child who was shamed into silence becomes the adult who responds to every emotional eruption with a fresh layer of shame, efficiently, automatically, without even noticing she's doing it. You are not developing accountability when you do this. You are re-abusing the child who already wasn't protected the first time. This is the part that almost no one sees, because the shame feels mature. It feels like the correction that should prevent the next outburst. But what it actually does is compound the original wound. The child inside didn't act out because she wanted to embarrass you. She acted out because she was in pain, because a need that was never met suddenly screamed loud enough to take control. And your response, "This is pathetic, get it together," is exactly what was said to her, or implied, or demonstrated, back when the wound was first made. The cycle locks itself in place. The child acts out. The adult shames her back into hiding. The shame adds another layer of pain to the original wound. And the wound, now deeper, becomes even more volatile the next time it's triggered. You don't get better at managing it. You get more explosive, more ashamed, more confused about who you actually are. Bradshaw was unambiguous about this. Shame is not the path out. It is the mechanism that keeps you trapped. The child inside you doesn't need to be disciplined into silence. She needs something she has never received, something most people find genuinely difficult to offer, especially to themselves. Before any real healing can begin, something else has to happen first. Something that was withheld at the very moment it was most needed. The instinct is to fix the reaction, to get better at pausing, at breathing, at not letting the child take over, to build enough control that the outbursts stop, the panic quiets, the desperation stays hidden. This feels like progress. It isn't. It's a more sophisticated version of the same suppression that created the wound in the first place. Bradshaw was precise about this. The wounded inner child doesn't need to be managed. She needs to be met. And meeting her requires something that feels, to most people, almost counterintuitive. Not correction, but validation. The child froze because something real happened to her. A need that was legitimate, for safety, for unconditional love, for permission to feel what she felt, went unanswered. And the most damaging part wasn't just the absence of what she needed. It was the message that came with it, that her pain wasn't real, that her feelings were too much, that she should be different from what she was. Validation is the reversal of that message. It is the first act of repair. This means something specific. When you notice a reaction that doesn't belong to your adult life, the panic that's too large, the grief that arrives from nowhere, the rage that surprises you, you stop trying to override it. You get curious instead. You ask, how old is this? What does this remind me of? When was the first time I felt exactly this? Not as an intellectual exercise, as an honest attempt to find the child who is speaking. And when you find her, the 5-year-old who watched her father leave and didn't know if he was coming back, the 9-year-old who was laughed at in front of the class and never recovered, you don't tell her to calm down. You tell her the truth, that what she felt was real, that her pain made sense, that she wasn't too much, that she wasn't wrong for needing what she needed. This is what Bradshaw called reparenting, the adult you are now, consciously offering what the child in you never received. It sounds simple. It is not. Because the part of you that knows how to validate a child's pain is the same part that was taught, very early, that such pain didn't deserve validation. You will feel resistance. You will feel embarrassed. You will feel like this is indulgent, like you are making excuses for behavior that should simply stop. That resistance is not wisdom. It is the wound speaking. The child inside you has been waiting, not for you to get more disciplined, not for you to finally achieve enough control to keep her quiet. She has been waiting for you to turn around and look at her. Really look. What you've been avoiding doing that, and why that avoidance has a much higher price than you've allowed yourself to see, is where we need to go next. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebooks. Beyond the Shadow breaks down Jung's core ideas, while Dialogues with the Unconscious gives you a 30-day path to apply them in your life. Both are linked in the pinned comment. Here is the thing most people never say out loud. It is easier to be ashamed of your reactions than to face what's underneath them. Shame, for all the damage it does, is at least familiar. It keeps you moving. It gives you something to fix, something to improve, a narrative where the problem is your lack of discipline rather than a wound that goes back decades. Avoidance dressed as self-criticism is still avoidance, and it is extraordinarily effective. Bradshaw saw this pattern repeatedly in his clinical work. Adults who had built entire lives, careers, relationships, identities, organized, often unconsciously, around not feeling what the child inside them felt. Not because they were weak, because the original feeling was genuinely unbearable. A 4-year-old cannot metabolize abandonment. A 7-year-old cannot process the shame of being humiliated by someone she depended on for survival. So the feeling gets buried, and the adult life gets constructed, brick by brick, on top of that burial site. The workaholism that keeps you too busy to be still. The relationships you sabotage right before they get close enough to matter. The compulsive need for achievement, for approval, for control, not as character flaws, but as architecture. Structures built precisely to ensure you never have to feel what the child felt. Bradshaw was unsparing about this. Most of what adults call personality is, in significant part, a defense against the unresolved pain of childhood. And the cost is not abstract. Every year you spend not looking at the child inside you is a year she spends running things from below the surface. The reactions keep coming. The relationships follow the same patterns. The same triggers find you in different rooms, different decades, different versions of the same situation. Because the wound underneath hasn't changed. You've gotten older. She hasn't. What makes this particularly hard is that turning toward the child means feeling what she felt, not a managed therapeutic version of it. The actual feeling, the terror, the grief, the longing that was never answered. Most people get close to that edge and pull back. They tell themselves they've done enough, that they understand it intellectually, that they don't need to go further. But Bradshaw was clear. Intellectual understanding of a wound is not the same as healing it. The child doesn't need you to comprehend her suffering from a safe distance. She needs you to enter it with her, to be present for what she was left alone to carry. This is the work most people are actually avoiding. Not the journaling, not the therapy, not the inner child exercises. Those are just vehicles. What's being avoided is the moment of genuine contact with a pain that was real, that mattered, that shaped everything, and that has never once been fully acknowledged. You've outrun it for years, built a life around the running, and some part of you already knows that the running hasn't worked, because the child is still there, still frozen, still sending up flares in the form of reactions that embarrass you and confuse the people you love. The question is no longer whether the wound exists. You already know it does. The question is whether you are finally willing to become the person who goes back for her. Here is the hardest truth this video has been building toward. No one is coming. Not your partner, not your therapist, not the parent who failed you. Not in the way the child needed them to come. The wound was made in a specific time, by specific people, in a world that no longer exists. And the child inside you has been waiting for a rescue that, from the outside, was never going to arrive. The only person who can go back for her is you. This is not a consolation. It is a confrontation. Bradshaw called this reparenting, but the word undersells what it actually demands. It isn't a technique. It isn't a visualization exercise you do on Sunday mornings and then set aside. It is a fundamental reorientation of your relationship to yourself. It means becoming, consciously and repeatedly, the adult that the child inside you needed and never had. The one who shows up instead of disappearing, who stays instead of withdrawing, who says your pain was real instead of stop being so sensitive, who loves without conditions attached. Most people find this genuinely difficult, not because the idea is complicated, but because the part of you that knows how to show up for a wounded child is the same part that was never shown how. You are being asked to give something you were never given, to learn a language you were never taught. That is real. It deserves to be named without minimizing it. But here is what Bradshaw documented across years of workshops and clinical work. When the adult finally turns toward the child, not to fix her, not to silence her, but to genuinely meet her, something shifts. Not all at once, not permanently, not immediately, but the reactions begin to lose their voltage. The triggers don't disappear, but they stop detonating the same way. The child, finally seen and finally safe, stops having to scream to be heard. She doesn't need to hijack you anymore, because you are already there. This is what integration looks like. Not the absence of the child, but her presence, acknowledged, held, no longer exiled to the part of you that only surfaces in crisis. You stop being an adult with a hidden child running chaos underneath. You become something more complete, a person who contains their own history without being controlled by it. The work is not linear. There will be regressions. There will be moments when the child takes over again, when the shame returns, when the whole architecture feels like it's collapsed. That is not failure. That is the nature of wounds that were laid down before you had language for them. What matters is not that you never get hijacked again. What matters is that you know, now, what is happening when you do, and that you know how to go back every time and find her. Leave a comment below with the one reaction in your life that you've never been able to explain, the one that's always felt too big, too old, too foreign to the person you think you are. You might be surprised how many people are carrying the exact same child. The process that began here doesn't end with this video. There's more underneath. Patterns that predate your memories, wounds that shaped you before you had words for any of it. If something in this video moved in you, that movement is telling you something. Follow it.